Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is Asalha Puja, full moon of July. They historically handed down as the point in history when the Buddha offered his first teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Also, tomorrow marks the entry into the 3-month annual rains retreat, so it's quite an auspicious conglomeration of days which are totally linked. We're planning to do a circumambulation of the monument, the stupa in the field there. There's a water blessing in the region, also known as rain, and so it's just there's a little mist, a little bit here and there, but I think we should just go for it, see what happens. We'll be chanting the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, in English that's called Setting in Motion the Wheel of Dhamma. And that's when we get out there. And so please feel free to bring a book. It's in the golden-colored volume. There's 2 volumes of the chanting book. It's in the golden-colored volume, the lighter volume. And it begins on page 2. And Ajahn Ahimsako will be inviting you to do the solo introduction. So if you need to bring the book, give you a heads up. And so, but we'll begin. There's a recitation. I'll read out line by line, and you repeat after me. And this is to recollect, to reflect on this event. So we'll begin first also by doing the homage to the Triple Gem in the Pali scripture language. That begins on page 18 in the dark brown volume. Okay, so... So bhagava arahang sama sambuddho swagato yena bhagavata dhammo sipatipanno yasa bhagavato savaka sangho Namayan Bhagavandang Zadhammang Zasanghang Ime Hisakare Hiyatarahang Aropite Hiyadi Pujayama Sadhuno Bhante Bhagava Sujira Parinidbhutopi Bhajima Janadanugampa Manasa Ime Sakare Durgatapana Garabuddhe Padiganatu Amhagangi Garadang Hitaya Sugaya Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagava bhagavata dhammo dhammang namasami. Sipatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho sanghang namami. Andamayang buddhassa bhagavato puba bhaganamakarang karomase. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so repeat after me. I'll do short line by line. All of us take the Buddha, as our refuge. And we delight in the Dhamma that he taught. Sorry, that was the wrong one. They probably all start the same. It does, actually, but I was at Asalha Puja, excuse me. No mindfulness. So, continuing, he is an arahant. Fully enlightened by himself. And has compassion for all sentient beings. Being moved by compassion. He has set rolling the matchless wheel of the Dhamma. He proclaimed the Four Noble Truths. For the first time, to the group of 5 bhikkhus at the Deer Park, near Benares on the full moon of July. At that time, while this discourse was being given, the spotless, immaculate vision of the Dhamma arose in the Venerable Anya Kondanya thus. All that is subject to arising is subject to ceasing. After that, he asked for the going forth from the Blessed One, and became the first person in the world to receive the full acceptance as a bhikkhu disciple. At that time, the Sangha was born. And so the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, were established in the world. All of us have now gathered here on this auspicious full moon day of July, it being the day when the Blessed One proclaimed the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta.
When the Blessed One proclaimed the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta.
It being the day when the noble Sangha was born.
It being the day when the noble Sangha was born.
Into the world.
Into the world.
And the triple gem was established.
And the triple gem was established.
So we have gathered here at this time.
So we are gathered here at this time.
With these offerings.
With these offerings.
And recollecting the virtues of the Buddha.
And recollecting the virtues of the Buddha.
We shall circumambulate the stupa 3 times.
We shall circumambulate the stupa 3 times.
Although he passed into Nibbana long ago,
Although he passed into Nibbana long ago,
the Buddha's guiding influence
the Buddha's guiding influence
is still with us today.
is still with us today.
May our offerings be received
May our offerings be received
and accepted
and accepted
for our long-lasting welfare
for our long-lasting welfare
and for the happiness of all future generations.
and for the happiness of all future generations.
Sadhu. So how's it looking outside? Good enough. Okay, so what we'll do is, so the monastic community will go through our typical door, go around the back, and a group of people kindly made flowers, incense, and candles for us to collect on the back table. Once the monastic community has collected ours, and then if there's any still there, please, our guests this evening, please feel free to take some. And I believe there's also incense in the doorway there on the way out. And so we'll gather outside and then circumambulate 3 times. The monastic community will go up, after we've gone around 3 times, we'll go up onto the upper level. And if our guests could please remain down around on the ground level there. And once we've all gathered, then we'll chant the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So.
The flowers at the back of the shrine will be right before you go to the foyer for tomorrow. There's some more flowers in the corner over there. That was left there, but it's for tomorrow.
I took one, but there's more. Okay. Apparently there's some flowers there that are not for use this evening, but they're labeled.
They're inside the shrine here. Not in the foyer, just at the back here.
Oh, at the back here.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could not take those flowers.
Yeah. Thank you.
Those are for tomorrow. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. For those of us that are familiar with what the Buddha was saying in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, so not just chanting it in the Pali, obviously, and even in whatever language is our language that we understand, but to really understand the meaning, the significance, and to reflect on that meaning. It was a teaching that, yes, is historically handed down as the first, often referred to as a sermon or teaching. And to his 5 former colleagues, I guess you could say, group they were practicing together, in particular practicing a lot of austerities, ascetic practices, and the Buddha branched off on his own. History says that the others were a bit disappointed because the Buddha started eating a little bit more properly. Instead of being really ascetic with his eating practices, he took care of the body more. And so he branched out, and he was practicing as we've heard and read, practicing in what is Bodh Gaya, present-day Bodh Gaya. And this is where he realized the great way, the great awakening. A fully liberated heart. And then after remaining there in Bodh Gaya for some time, reflecting on what he actually realized, really reflecting on it. And also reflecting on initially that this is too subtle for other beings to understand. So he didn't feel it was something that he could share just because of that subtlety wouldn't come across. But just like this introduction or request, Dhamma talk request that Anagarika Jyotaka just recited. The Brahma God had sort of tuned into the Buddha's thinking and came to him and said, please, out of compassion for those with little dust in their eyes, please teach the Dhamma. And isn't it a good thing for us that the Buddha didn't ignore that? Because he didn't ignore that, we're able to be here tonight practicing. So the Buddha considered, okay, who do I teach? And he considered various people who had been close to him, teachers in particular, and yet the people that he thought of, it turns out they had passed away and couldn't teach them. So then he thought of his 5 friends there, and so he pretty much knew where he thought they were, and so they were in near Varanasi, Benares, India. And so he set out walking, often referred to in English as walking in stages, so taking time to walk. I looked it up on Google Maps. It's 155 miles. So that's the walking mode. Walking by present-day footpaths and streets, roads. And if walking at Google speed, it's 52 hours of walking. But Buddha took longer than that. He took his time. He set out and he found them. And it's lovely for those of us who have been there. There's a stupa that marks the place where they believe the Buddha was standing when the 5 other ascetics spotted him in the distance, before arriving actually in the deer park there in Benares. And I had missed that in my reading before going to India, and I quite appreciated that extra sort of commemoration. And then when he met with them, he offered this teaching. And as we chanted in the Pali, and then one of the 5, Venerable Kondanya, he got it. He entered the stream of Dhamma, entered the stream, and it's considered that you won't have more than seven other lifetimes before realizing full liberation of the heart. Kondanya, Venerable Kondanya. And as we read in the English, because that was in part of the English reading, the insight that Venerable Kondanya had, this great insight that sort of catapulted him into the stream, for lack of a better word, was all that arises ceases. All that arises ceases. And myself and many people find it interesting because that's not part of the sutta. It's not said in the sutta. It lays out the 4 noble truths. The first noble truth, that there is dukkha, there is this unsatisfactoriness, dissatisfaction, discontent, dis-ease, pain, suffering, unpleasant. Second noble truth is that there's a cause. There is a cause. It's not just comes from nothing. And that cause is this craving for sensual pleasure through the 6 senses: eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, intellect. A craving for identity, to become, to acquire, to become something, to be seen as, to be. And then the third type of craving mentioned is to not be seen as, to get rid of the annihilation energy. Third noble truth is that there is an end to this dis-ease, discomfort, discontent, stress. It can cease. It does cease. And then the 4th noble truth is the path which actually leads us to that. This is what the Buddha taught in that teaching. And yet, Venerable Kondanya, the insight was all that arises ceases. Impermanence is one of these core tenets of the Buddha's teaching. That impermanence, ephemerality, the transient nature of all conditioned things. So I ponder this a lot, I reflect on this a lot, that this word dukkha, which I suppose historically in the English language, the translation that you're going to get most frequently, since it was translated, is suffering. And yet that's having a basket of words, I find, I know other many people that I've spoken to, they find having that sort of basket or cluster of words really helps indicate the nuance in which dukkha can manifest. Suffering, I know when I first heard that, I thought, well, suffering is, when you read about or see something on the news or something, that's some disaster or just horrific situation, that's the way in my mind really considered the word suffering. Oh, that's suffering. So what's happening when you read about the wars that are taking place and the strife and painful situations, suffering. But what the Buddha was pointing at was everything from the most subtle movements of mind, of stress, to that full-blown suffering that maybe many of us are more familiar with. But also the word dukkha can literally just mean pain, painful. So especially when it's coupled with another Pali word, which Vedana, feeling. And in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, is that feeling just has three categories. They're sort of feeling tones: painful, pleasant, or neutral. It's not emotion, like the way we refer to it in English. We'd say, "Oh, my feelings." That's typically emotional. But Vedana is more just, as I said, this tone. So when you couple the words, and don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into a Pali language lesson, because, well, for two reasons. It's not really what this evening's about, and second, I can't do it. I don't have the skill. So dukkha vedana, painful feeling. So the Buddha experienced, from what we're handed down historically, the Buddha still experienced dukkha vedana. And there's references in the suttas, in the scriptures, of him experiencing dukkha vedana. Oh, Venerable so-and-so, could you please finish this talk or expound the Dhamma, because my body hurts. I need to go rest. I need to go lie down. And so he was experiencing painful, limited limitations within the body. Then in the one sutta, his recognition that his two chief disciples had passed away within a very short span of each other, and noticing in the assembly, and he knew they'd passed away. It wasn't the first time he realized, but to make the expression, "Oh, this assembly feels empty. Is empty without these venerables." So that's pretty bare bones. We don't know exactly, what he was feeling. But there was this recognition that there was a change which was not pleasant. He was a fully enlightened Buddha. So if we're human, we're not going to escape dukkha vedana. So even though fully liberated, but what we can escape is the dukkha based on grasping, on clinging, on this craving. That one we can let go of. We can develop the heart, the mind that can experience the unpleasant and the pleasant and not cling and not experience dukkha. And so this is the teaching that the Buddha laid out. The Four Noble Truths was this is the roadmap. This is the practice, and it needs to be applied intellectually. Reading the sutta, you can even memorize it. You can memorize it in Pali. You can memorize it in English or whatever language it's been translated to that we are most familiar with. It doesn't take all that long to memorize that. And then, knowing that teaching, we can then use for reflection, to hold up our moment by moment experience, whatever lands, and hold that experience up in the mirror of Dhamma. These are reflective teachings. And so using these the Four Noble Truths themselves are, when you read them, they're incredibly simple. And yet, as Lumpur Sumedho has referred to many times, he considers it the perfect teaching, and something that he's used for most of his 60 years of practice. Still using that as his reference, reflecting on it, sharing. And that's up to us. It's up to us to use these teachings. Because sometimes when something seems very simple, at least the way my mind can work, especially in the beginning, is that you take it in intellectually, but without that reflective application of the Dhamma, of what the Buddha shared, these myriad teachings that he offered, they're meant for reflection. There's just really a handful of pure meditation instruction, just a few, and yet volumes of teachings have been handed down to us that are reflective teachings. And a lot of them, just different angles of the same teaching, of the same points that he was trying to get us to consider and to be able to view our experience, as I was saying a few moments ago, to be able to experience our humanness and our human existence through the eyes of Dhamma instead of through the eyes of ignorance, the eyes of clinging and grasping, the eyes of clinging at identity, self-identity, clinging to sense pleasure. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't experience sense pleasure, but it's the clinging. It doesn't mean that we have to go around identity-less, without an identity. No, it's still, in a conditioned, mundane world, we have an identity. I have my monk's name, I have my lay name, I have 2 passports, we call each other our names, Ajahn Chittapala, Ajahn Kuniko, so on and so forth. Yes, we're Buddhist monastics, so we use these labels skillfully, and yet we also know that these are just constructs. These things are formed. Buddha came into being. Buddhist philosophy came into being. It's carried on. How long it will last, we don't know. The Buddha himself predicted that it wouldn't last all that long. And it's outlasted his prediction so far, which is very nice. But we need, to use this amazing list of teachings. Doesn't mean we need to know all of them. I know years ago a friend of mine wrote me an email and said they were a lay friend in London who I knew years ago, and said that They had only, were using one of the scripture books, the Majjhima Nikaya, and they said, I haven't memorized all these teachings yet, and then I need to go through all the other volumes. And I encouraged her not to not read them. I didn't say don't read them, but not to feel that everything had to land, and just to really choose, the core teachings and the things that really resonate to reflect on. And so, tonight, all of us have the luxury to be in this room in terms of we've got the time, we've got the safety. It's a safe place. All of us have as I mentioned a minute ago, we've got the time to come here. Maybe we're watching this on YouTube. We have the time to be watching this, whether live or later on. And so this is something to not be ignored, because we have this, the privilege in our life to have that opportunity, and to not squander it. There's that lovely reflection that we chant frequently, part of the list of 10 subjects for recollection. The days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well am I spending my time? How am I actually using my time skillfully? Develop as a human being. Liberate the heart. And we're all here. This is what we're trying to do. Using these opportunities like this evening is quite ceremonial. And if we use ceremony skillfully, it can encourage us to pay respects. Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. To pay respects to the Buddha, to recollect his teachings. These are all fuel for practice. And so our tradition also says that tomorrow we enter the rains retreat, the Vasa, referred to in the Pali scripture language. 3-month period of us we will determine to live in this monastery for these 3 months. We can leave for certain reasons. There's a healthy list of good reasons. But we need to be back before the 7th dawn, so 6 days. To be back. We'll be studying the Vinaya. We'll be having solitary retreat periods of group retreat, for instance, starting tomorrow morning. Practicing together, then practicing in solitude. Monastery remains open the whole time because this is our good season for people to be traveling and coming and visiting here. A lot of people on holiday now. It's summer in this part of the world. We'll be focusing on these aspects of practice. And having solitary retreat and really being able to put things down on the practical side. Put things down to be able to really ponder and deepen our intellectual understanding as well. Because to be able to use these teachings, we need to understand them. And once we have a decent grasp, then we can really then hold them up, as I was saying earlier, hold them up to our experience. What's entering the heart and mind? Is there clinging? Is there dukkha? And the more quiet the mind and heart goes, the more subtle the dukkha that we'll see. And more subtle we'll see the clinging and all the little, the large ones are easy to see typically, or easier. But to start to see those ones that are maybe part of our blind spot, that expression in English, we have a blind spot. Don't see. like a pond. The more still the pond, and the deeper, the more clear we can see down and deeper into the water and see what's deep down in there. And the Buddha taught this because he saw that human beings could realize this. So, up to us. It's up to us. Which is both, I find, a really lovely thought. It's not up to some outside force, our liberation. It's not up to something outside, it's up to us. And on the other hand, you go, oh wow, I've got to do it. I wish somebody else could do it. Just sort of, you're enlightened. It's not the way it is. So I think that's enough to offer this evening for reflection. And so we're not having a midnight vigil this week because we're starting our group practice tomorrow at 5 in the morning. So out of compassion, we'll wrap up. But we'll chant from the dark brown volume. We'll chant the verses of sharing an aspiration in Pali. And that's, I believe, on page 32. Yeah, 32. Dark brown volume, page 32. Andamaya Desana Dithanagatayo Banamase Yemena Punyakamena Upajaya Gunutaraha Chariyupakara Jamata Pita Chanyata Kasuriyo Chandi Maharaja Gunawanta Narapicha Brahma Maharaja Inda Jalokapala Jadevata Yamamita Manusa Jamajata Verika Pijasa Besata Sakihanda Bunyani Pakatani Mesukanchati Vida Dentuki Pangba Petavamata Yemena Punyakamena Yemena Desana Jaki Pahang Sulabe Chevadanupa Dana Jedanang Yesandane Hina Dhamma Yabani Banato Mamang Nasantu Sabada Yebayata Jado Bhave Ujujita Zade Panya Sale Gaviriyam Hina Mara Labandana Kazanga Dunjaviri Yesume Buddha Di Bhavaro Nado Dhammo Nado Varudhammo Nado Bhajeka Buddha Chasango Nado Taro Mama Desa Dhamma Nubhave Namaro Kasang Labhantuma. And we'll chant the closing homage in Pali and English, and that's on page 16 in the same book, page 16. Arahant
Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, Sangha